welcome back to the channel. The last video that I did was the German thrash metal from 1986, and in the comments there was a lot of people talking about this record here. The one and only album from Violent Force came out in 1987, Malevolent Assault of Tomorrow. Had this album been in 86, it definitely would have been in that video, because it's definitely one of those highly sought after records from that era. Very, very good. It was one of those bands that I first heard about in the late 90s, and it was pretty much impossible to find at the time. I had a pen pal named Cheryl who was also on my message board under the name Skyclad, along with her future husband, who went under the name Black Goat. Of course, she would move from the United States to Germany in around 2001, and they got married, and he ran until his passing in 2017. He was the owner of Barbarian Wrath record label, and she continues to own that label along with her own Witch's Brew record label, so you may know her through there. But back in the old days of the late 90s and into the 2000s, both her and her husband were part of my message board. So I learned a lot about music through both of those guys, and she used to send me extra albums as she would get. But anyway, this one was one that she had strongly recommended and talked about all the time. However, it was so unbelievably out of print that it would take me a long time to track it down. So this is a reissue on vinyl. I've never even seen the original vinyl in real life, just online. And I did track down a CD of it back in the day, though, and so I had listened to that. But really, really good record. If you're familiar with this record, then there's nothing you need to know. But if you are not familiar with this record, definitely check out the title track and SDI, Violent Force. The whole record is really good. I will tell you, though, some people, and somebody actually even in the comments had said that the song Dead City was like their favorite song, and that's the one song that I didn't really care for too terribly much, and it happens to open the record. So if you can imagine my surprise, because we weren't listening online back then, so if you can imagine when I first got the record finally, I first got the album CD finally, and that song opened the album, I thought, oh my gosh, what are they talking about? But while I've grown to love that song, the rest of the album is quite a bit of a different story. So really, really good record. Again, German thrash from 1987. If you haven't heard this record, definitely track it down. There's the Dead City demo is out there as well. You can get that. And then, unfortunately, this was all that they had done. So, perfect German thrash, though. Just awesome stuff.
The end is the right thing to get free. The thing you're in the shock. Congratulations, we got it right. The never-ending diet. Now it's too late to lose the world. Sense of attention and riot. Yes, the eye. You never know why. Since to the death and disaster. Gonna be right, just wait till you die.
This was another one that was talked about a lot in the comments underneath the German thrash metal video. And of course, this record came out in 1985, which is why I didn't mention it. But again, this is another one of those really, really good speed metal, thrash metal albums. It definitely has a good mixture of both styles on it. It's a very unique album. I have talked about this one before, so I won't go too far into this, but it was one of those albums that I found back in the mid-90s when I was working graveyard shift. I found it on tape. The inside didn't have any information in it, but as soon as I put it on my headphones that night, I knew this was a German band, and I pretty much liked it immediately. I thought it sounded like a German version of Possessed or something. maybe not quite as menacing, except for the song Nightmare has some pretty amazing riffs in it that go that path. But another album that is just a German speed metal, thrash metal classic record, and all of the praise that this album got in the comments are absolutely 100% agree with. Really, really good stuff. Great record. Round two for this one. So, interestingly enough, in my head, I had always thought this was a record from 1986, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I was recording that last video, and I happened to look down and see 1987 on it, and recorded in November 1986, and I thought, okay, I guess I just remembered that completely wrong, so I thought I messed up. But then, Thomas from Merciful Metal in the comments pointed out that actually the very first pressing of this album on Steamhammer is from 1986, but then it was reissued in 1987, and that's widely, most every pressing after that initial small run on Steamhammer does say 1987. So actually, it is a 1986 album. I confused myself, and luckily he set the record straight. And sure enough, Steamhammer version, 1986. I doubt you can see that, but it does say 1986 right there. So, yep. And again, really good record. So, if you don't have this, definitely go find it.
I don't love paying like ridiculously high prices, just like everybody else. What are we supposed to do? I mean, the problem is when I go online and my computer's sitting right there, there's nothing I can't fucking find.
Slaughterlord, Thrash Till Death, 1986 to 1987. Like most people that I know or have ever heard of, I came to discover this band in the year 2000 when they put out this compilation album of demos and whatnot from the 80s. Now, what got me to thinking about this record, which is great, this is really great, kind of like a proto-blackened thrash, reminiscent of kind of like early Sodom. And what got me thinking about this was some of the comments by some people who were in the scene back in the German scene back in the mid-80s, who corrected me in the comments by saying that the band Poison from Germany, actually there's a bit of a revisionist history there, and that band was in no way as important as the revision has suggested that they were. So now I'm wondering about Slaughterlord. It's kind of been planted into my head that this was a really important band from that era and that their music was influential even way back then, but now I'm wondering if that's true. So I'd be really curious if there's anybody from Australia or anybody that just was kind of in the scene at the time that knew about this band and would assign any kind of true importance to it other than either revisionist history or just simply picking it up around the year 2000 and having some sort of influence on somebody then at that point. But it is worth tracking down, and it's some pretty good thrash. Like I said, it's like a blackened thrash, kind of predates that movement, which would be more of the 90s, but nice one. If anybody has any information, I'd be really curious to know how this band was kind of seen in the 80s, in the mid-80s when they were active, as opposed to just this compilation which came out around the year 2000. Here's a little snippet of Slaughterlord playing live in Melbourne in 1987. That crowd looks pretty enthusiastic. Keep in mind that there was only demos available at this time, no records. So either these fans had the demos or they're just locals that love to go to all the shows. I've seen it both ways. A lot of enthusiasm here. The band is on fire. Love that. A lot of Slayer influence, Sodom. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you know. This is the 1987 debut from the band Wolf Spider. That's how you say Wolf Spider in Polish, and the band's name was written out this way, so this does not actually say Wolf Spider in English anywhere on it, which originally caused me a little bit of confusion because I thought that I had all of their albums and then I realized I was missing one, and it was difficult to figure that out, but I did eventually, and so I've got this. This is fantastic Polish thrash metal, technical thrash metal. A lot of the Poles were really good musicians. A lot of them grew up with jazz, black backgrounds. There's a lot of music in their culture, and it's not just simple music. It's classical. There's a lot of classical composers, a lot of jazz musicians. And so there's this type of music kind of ingrained in a lot of their DNA. And it came through in not only their death and thrash metal, but even some of their punk. It's pretty crazy. That's another story for another time. Anyway, this album coming out in 1987 was during a time of transition in Poland. They were at the very tail end of the communist era and still under one-party rule. And a lot of their albums were still going through record labels like Polmark, and I don't remember the other ones, but that there was a lot of heavy censorship, which is really interesting to me. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know the whole story of this because I'm sure that there's a lot of holes, but originally I had a lot of Polish pen pals back in the early 2000s, and that's how I got a lot of these albums. They would literally come with pen pal writing back and forth. We'd send packages to each other. Those are some of the nicest, coolest people, pen pal wise, that I ever knew of or talked to. They were really helpful. They would get all kinds of cool stuff. They found all kinds of cool records like this, CDs and tapes, trinkets, and what they wanted in return was information. They just loved like Western culture here in the US, and so they had a lot of questions, and then there were some things that they just couldn't get over there album wise, and so I would help them out in exchange. But this album is all written in Polish lyrically, and so I actually did have it translated way back in the day. And the album is lyrically about oppression, fallen empires, human rage, nightmares, that kind of thing. And so I'm really shocked that this got through any kind of the censorship that would have been going on. Now, it is one of the early Metal Mind Productions albums, but it came out on Razim label, which was very similar to, it was a Polish version of like Columbia House or BMG. They put out mostly, and they didn't even put out very many albums, but they were state run. At least I think that they were state run. And anyway, they're the ones that put this out. So those generally came out in 1,000 per run was what they did. I saw some of the more poppy stuff had 1,500 in those runs. But anyway, technical thrash metal, really, really well executed, really good record, and definitely one of those rare records that in my collection that I really, really favor. Good stuff.
This is very important in their life, definitely, because this is the only thing they got actually right now in Poland.
I prefer to have such a security like we have here than to have cancelled concerts.
The records are very hard to obtain in Poland, although let's say there are a few private shops that they sell albums. But the prices are really very steep. Let's say, for example, a new album can cost you about 5,000 zlotys, which is about 1/3 of an average month's salary in Poland.
Do you remember Soldiers of Fortune by Loudness? Came out in 1989. That was one of the first Loudness records that I heard. And once I got to learn more of their older stuff, especially like from the mid-'80s to the later 80s, the 3 or so albums leading up to Soldiers of Fortune, I realized that there was there was almost like a push for an American sound. So Loudness through an American lens with an American singer, but still very much Loudness. Anyway, all of that to say that I found this band from Canada called Psy, S-Y-E. This is their Turn on the Fire. I believe this is the debut. It is the debut. They've got one more. This one was from 1985, and I just found their second record. I should have pulled that and showed it to you. But anyway, this reminds me so much of Loudness, like the Soldier of Fortune sound. It's just like that. It's heavy metal. There's a couple of songs that are a little bit on the faster side. The riffs on the record are smart. You can tell that there's some serious musicianship going on here, but it is kind of, how would you say, toned down a little bit. But yeah, it just sounds like a Canadian version of American influenced Loudness, 1989 style. Not bad, check it out. someone asked me about this band in the comments, and so I thought that I would show their debut album. This came out in 1987 on a small label. This particular version is the second version, which came out in 1988 on another small label, and is the widely circulated version of the album, at least for what it is. It was always a small thing, but this is very interesting because being from 1987, written from 1986 into 87, the album shockingly sounds ahead of its time. It came out before a lot of albums that would eventually sound like it. The one that I would nail the most closest to this is Testament's debut album, The Legacy, that also came out in 1987. So there's no overlap there. There was no way that one heard the other or any of that kind of stuff. But it's just really, really tight riffs, excellent thrash. Reminds me a lot of like everything from Overkill, Anthrax, Flotsam and Jetsam, and they were from Switzerland, Swiss band. Whiplash kind of had that kind of edge to it, but anyway, yeah. So I just thought I would show this real quick, and this is some really, really good, guess kind of early thrash, being for 87 and sounding the way that it does. If it came out in 1989, you wouldn't even think about it. You'd be like, yep, that's what bands were doing in 1989, but a little bit of ahead of its time, I think. I'll show you a sample coming up here. Back in the 90s, albums still came out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Nowadays, at least here in the States, they come out mostly on Fridays. But sometimes you wouldn't really know that an album was out until you saw it on the shelf, or the release dates were subjective a lot of times too, which was really odd. It just was very loose. Like, there were times where records would come out that had a specific release date and you would go to get it and it'd be like, that moved to tomorrow. Great. So anyway, back in 1999, I was on my way out. I was on my way to Portland, actually, to go stay the weekend at a friend's house. And it was a bunch of us guys getting together to talk about metal music. We were all friends from my message board. A lot of us lived in either California, Oregon, Washington, or even Idaho. And so we would all kind of go to this one guy's house who had like the biggest record collection of us all. And he was down in Oregon. So I stopped in Seattle on my way out and saw that this album had come out and picked it up and was really excited, bought it on CD. So then I had, 150 miles to go from there. So I popped this album, and I didn't know that Randy Rampage was back on vocals. So once the vocals started up and that amazing riff on Back to the Palace, I was so stoked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought this was such a return to form. So anyway, it's a really good memory for me, just flying down the freeway, going really fast, and listening to this for the first time, and feeling like, after hearing Randy back on the vocals and the way that Jeff was playing his riffs and stuff, I thought, gosh, it's like being with an old friend or something, back from the first Annihilator album, Alice in Hell, which is still their best. But I really loved the first three, and then I kind of fell off a little bit, and I took a chance on this one. And so to hear Randy back in the band was just great. But anyway, there's a couple of low spots on here, but for the most part, this is a pretty solid record, and it's attached to good memories and a pretty good time. It was a fantastic weekend. We really didn't sleep. We stayed up all night long listening to anything that we didn't know in Dave's collection. So that was pretty fun. Somebody would get up, go to the shelf, go until they found an album they didn't know, pull it out, put it on, and then we would sit and listen to it and critique it. And it was especially fun when nobody had heard the album before, and so we were all hearing it for the first time and then talking about it. Some of those conversations I'll talk about in a later video, but some of those conversations I still remember to this day because they were so impactful to be with people hearing certain albums for the first time and then talking about it. A lot of memories were made, but anyway, a lot of that centers around this album for that particular weekend. It was a good time. It's a good record, and this reissue is really well done as well. I always wanted this on vinyl, and I don't know if it ever had a vinyl run. I don't think it did. If it did, I never saw it. So I got it now. It sounds great. Earlier I was talking about my old message board, and if I haven't mentioned it before, for about 10 years I had a website called Justin's Heavy Metal Website. How original is that, right? And so it used to be reviews, news, and then it was kind of like I had little sections on like what thrash metal is or what this is and all this kind of stuff. And kind of the centerpiece of that whole thing was the message board, though, which at the height of its popularity, I think we probably got 200 or 300 people chatting in there, and it was just all about metal music in general. And anyway, I got in trouble with this album one time. I actually read a news clip that Helstar was reforming with the original members. That's all it said. And so I went ahead and reposted that in my own words and referenced the article and talked about this album. Now at the time I only had the tape of this album with this cover, and the J card had no information inside, so I couldn't read who was in the band or who played on it or anything. But anyway, I got an email from a guy named Tom Rogers, and he's like, "What do you mean the band's getting back together?" I'm like, I didn't know who he was. Well, that was the original guitar player who played on this record. And so he was concerned because I was claiming that the original Helstar lineup was getting back together, and he hadn't heard anything about it. So, my mistake. Anyway, he went to seek clarification from the record label back at whoever was handling, I think Massacre Records or something was dealing with Helstar back then. But anyway, this is one of my old favorites. This is an original 1984 press of this, with this cover. It had two covers, but I believe this is the American cover, and the other cover was this one here, and this is a reissue, but I got it for the cover. The other night I was actually listening to this one, though, my original 1984 copy, which is in excellent shape, and I was just sitting there thinking, man, how good this album sounds. And so then I decided, well, I've got time, so I went ahead and threw on this reissue from Flogger Records in 2012, and I decided to do some testing and kind of see. And so, as good as this sounds, it does not come close to sounding as good as this one. This one sounds like four musicians in a room, guitars, bass, and drums, completely separate, everything impactful, everything completely on its own. You can hear the guitars, you can hear the drums, the way that the drums are recorded, the top half of the kit is extremely pronounced. You can hear where it's at in the room, the cymbals, James Rivera's voice is just incredible on this, and on this one, that separation of instruments is just more closely bound together. It's more of a cohesive unit rather than a separate unit. However, and it sounds like compression was just added to the top of the whole thing. It still sounds great, and if this was your only copy, you would never care because it sounds excellent. But it is not the definitive way to hear this record. This is. The way it's recorded, just glorious. This is the combat version. And yeah, great record. This was back when they were more of a heavy metal band. They would morph into kind of a speed metal band. Everybody kind of knows this band, I think. But standout tracks, Burning Star and Dracula's Castle. The whole record, but specifically those two tracks I just love. And they open and close the album, so definitely great record, great band actually, still.
Bring back brutal justice. I'll going down in fire. Flames are getting higher. Burn through your desire. But in me one change is fire.
Psychopath, making the transition from 1991. Very technical death metal. Good growly vocals, but clear. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like Atheist, Cynic, the first record, Death, stuff like that. It's in that vein. I've only known about this album though for about a year and a half, I think, is when I finally tracked it down. It's really bizarre because I was pretty familiar with most of the names in the death metal scene back then, and I don't recall hearing Psychopath. So I just missed it basically, and it came out on the CNC label, which was just some small record label. So even when I discovered this and I decided to track it down, it was quite the process. But I did finally track it down. This is an original press because that's all that there is as far as I know. And so I've been living with this record for about a year and a half since I've got it, and it's really good. It's the production is good. It's the way that the drums are recorded is very analog sounding, so they're very natural. It doesn't sound like there's any kind of triggers or any of that kind of stuff going on. It sounds like when you hear a drummer like playing, warming up at a club or a garage or something. So you can hear that. You can hear the pedals hitting the skin naturally. It's got a particular sound to it. But yeah, what a great record. And they only did this one record as far as I know, and then they disappeared. I think some of these guys may have ended up in a different band at some point or something, but really, really good. Yeah. Psychopath, making the transition. Really cool cover too. Typical of the time. I'm really shocked I didn't run across this record. I'm just shocked. I would have remembered this. I would have picked it up and checked it out and remembered. Like this picture reminds me a lot of like Carcass or something, and so I'd have been all over this. But I never even got the opportunity as far as I know. This is a new band for me, Martyr. These reissues just came out, and from what I understand, these are also remixes. This album, Hopeless Hopes, came out in 1997, and once again, this is technical death metal, and it's really good technical death metal. The weak spot, I think, would be the vocals. That's it. Now, I had heard of this band, and I recognized the logo, but I had either checked them out and didn't like something about it, or I wasn't interested. I don't know, because it, the later 90s, I was kind of like, you've got 400 or 500 of these kind of bands, and it's just like enough for a while. Not only that, but I don't know if this, I think it had a limited run or was on a smaller label at first. Or maybe it did come out on Relapse from the beginning. Either way, I don't recall seeing it much to like re-pick it up and examine it or look at it or anything like that. But anyway, I picked up all 3 of their albums now, and for the last week I've been going through this one a lot, and the vocals were a little bit of the weak spot at first. They kind of grew on me. They're not a full death metal growl or gruff. They're kind of closer to a hardcore sound, but I don't know. It's fine. It's working for me. Their second record, Warp Zone, is really good. That one I'm really, really liking. But this is the one I've listened to the most, so it's just what's been playing in the last week or so. They were from Canada, another Canadian band. I don't recognize any of the names either, so I don't know what any of these other guys may have done. Probably something, though. With the level of musicianship that they've got going on, there's no way they're not in music somewhere, somehow, someplace. So, yeah, very good. I'm worried Relapse Records going to come after me for this one. You hear that hardcore influence in the vocals? Totally reminds me of Symbolic. King Diamond. Great stuff. Well, if you made it to the end of this, thank you. Just wanted to say thanks, and for those people that are leaving comments and liking and or subscribing or all of that, I really appreciate that. It helps push the video out, which I don't do this for any other reason than to just get the video out to people so that people can discover music in any way, new music or rediscover old music, or even become inspired to pick up their own records again. Whatever the case may be, that's the goal here. I'm doing this because of the passion only. I like to show the records, and I like to hear in the comments all the different things that you guys talk about and ask and whatnot. I think the next video will definitely be a questions answered video. There's pages of them at this point. So, but yeah, I really appreciate all the support and everything else. So thank you, and I'll talk to you on the next one. See ya.
I can't believe you don't own this fucking record. That's insane. Jesus.